Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to two thrilling authors, Alex Segura, who's the best-selling and award-winning author of Secret Identity. The New York Times called it wittily original, and it was named an editor's choice. Secret Identity also won the LA Book Prize for Mystery and Thriller last year. Rob Hart is the author of Assassins Anonymous, The Paradox Hotel, which was named one of NPR's best books of 2020, and The Warehouse, which has been published in more than 20 languages. They're here to discuss their upcoming release of Dark Space. Welcome, fellas.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel like I should be very Southern and say I feel like I'm in high cotton today because I'm with the cream of the crop.
I mean, this is we're just getting started on the promo, so you're kind of breaking us in here. This is the first time you and Alex are doing a podcast about this, so
yeah,
we're going to do our best.
All right. So if you don't behave, it'll be all right, and if you do behave, it'll be all right as well. So let's do it.
Exactly.
So who wants to give an overview of what Dark Space is about?
Alex, why don't you take that?
Sure. So the high concept we've been using is it's Star Trek meets John le Carré's George Smiley novels. It's a two protagonist story. One is planetside on the moon, and it's kind of a not so distant future from the Earth we know today. And the other side is aboard a ship headed towards the edge of known space. And I think it's, the broad strokes, it's a conspiracy thriller with heavy leanings towards sci-fi, but it's really about complicated people making complicated choices and grappling with their own troubled past. And as the story unfolds, you find out that the two protagonists, pilot Jose Carillas and Corin Timoney, who is she's been, basically demoted to desk duty, but she is a pretty renowned spy. You find out their history and their connective tissue and why they're both in the situations they're in. But it's really a story about messed up people and how they can redeem themselves, which is, I think, thematic in all our work.
I think so, too. And, it mirrors humanity because, we humans do things that sometimes are not as good as they are at other times. And then sometimes we make really heroic decisions that really make a difference. And that is something I think the two of you did so well in the fact that you gave us well-rounded humans that have issues, but yet they work really hard to get past their issues to do the right thing. So I found a lot of redeeming grace in the fact that these characters were working towards the right way.
Well, thank you.
So I know both of you live in the New York area. So do you get together to write, or do you write separately? And then do you have a Google Doc, or how does that work when there are two of you writing one novel?
Oh yeah, that was all Google Docs.
Yeah.
And a lot of furious late night text messaging about, various plot points. But, I feel really lucky in the sense that, Alex is a phenomenal co-author in the sense that, I think our styles mesh together well. I think we get each other. And I think we're both former journalists. So we both kind of have built into our DNA that the best idea has to win, and neither of us really had much of an ego about it. I think maybe once or twice one of us might have put our foot down on something and said, I want to do this. But for the most part, I mean, it was smooth sailing.
Yeah, there was no drama. I've co-written a lot of things with different people, and this is one of probably the most painless in that, we tracked our changes, but it was never like, oh my God, Rob is changing what I wrote. It was always, there's a valid reason for this, and we would always get a look at it again. And so what's funny now that some people have read the book and are starting to reach out and say, oh, I really liked it or whatever. They want to pigeonhole and say, oh, it's clear that Rob wrote this, or it's clear that you wrote that. And it's actually not clear. Like, we didn't split up the protagonists. Like, I wrote as much about Carillas as I did Timoney, and so did Rob. So I think people will be pleasantly surprised that it's unlike anything we would write individually, but it's also not clear who did what. And that's, I think, a testament to the collaboration that we were able to really give each other peeks into our process. Like, there's things that I do that I don't think Rob did that maybe he'll absorb, and vice versa. Like, Rob edits backwards too, which I found really useful, and I used with Alter Ego, which I was editing after we finished this. So, you do that backward read where you read the chapters out of order, and I'd never done that before, and I thought it was really useful here. And I tend to cast my characters, like literally put pictures of actors in the Google Doc just to help me visualize it, because I'm a pretty visual writer. And I don't think Rob did that before, and I'm not going to presume that you will do that again, but it was different. It's like we're seeing under the hood, which was fun.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a hugely helpful thing because it's a big cast. Like there's a lot of people, and you're dealing with like two different locations that are separated by light years.
Yeah.
So having that visual guide was incredibly helpful in terms of just being able to sort of like, look at you can look at an actor and kind of like assume right away like what kind of like gravitas they're bringing to it, what kind of like depth. And yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I got that too. I got people reaching out saying, well, you wrote this character and Alex wrote this character. I'm like, nope, we both wrote both.
Yeah.
They were like very impressed. They were like, that's amazing that you managed to mesh your styles to that degree.
And I think for me, I feel like I felt a flavor or two of each of your writing, but not so much one character. What I felt like, okay, in this situation, I feel like this canvas was painted on the back canvas was painted a little more in a Rob style, which I like that, because to me, it's a compliment and not, oh my gosh, you took one, you took the other, because I didn't see that at all. Because I felt the writing was very cohesive the entire way through. I felt like each person's voice came through clearly. And that, for me, as a reader, that's really what I want to see, because I don't want to have to fumble around trying to figure out a person's personality. So I felt like they went very smoothly.
That's good. Yeah. And I think a lot of it too was we're both planners in how we write. We outline, but not outline to the point of there's no wiggle room to create. I think there were a few moments where we decided to take the story in different directions that would eventually veer back into the outline, but allowed us some leeway. I think some characters died unexpectedly as we were writing, not to spoil anything, but that was a testament, I think, to being organized, but also being flexible.
And I think, or at least I must assume that as writers, if someone's going to die, you sort of have to agree on it. But yet it may come a little bit as a surprise, because when you're writing something, you see where something goes. But when you're collaborating with someone, obviously, if you're going to kill off somebody big, there has to be a conversation about it, I would assume. That gets a big note in Google Docs, right?
Or a text message before you share the doc.
Oh, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
I think that like that's the thing. And again, like that's the reason that me and Alex worked well on this, is that we both understood that like, at some point the story is going to demand something. And if the story demands it, then that's the decision that we have to make.
I love that. And I want to say also that by page 2, the thriller aspect of this was already ramped to 90 or 95. And that I love slow burn, but I also like something that grabs me by the collar and says, you will listen right now because I'm going to scare the shit out of you. So, or make you think something bad's happening. Yeah. You guys really did a great job with that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I will say that it's a bit, I think Alex mentioned, a bit of a political thriller as well. And it's so relevant to where we are in this day and age that there was no preaching, there was none of that, but there was a lot of what I would say reflections on our current world, what's going right and what's going wrong and where we're headed. And I think that as long as humanity is on Earth, that's the way it's always going to be. We'll always have questions about where we're going. And I liked that aspect of it. It was really, really interesting. Were you very invested in the political aspect of it, or was that sort of a secondary story for you?
I think that kind of arises from the setting and the terms of like, and there are obviously parallels to the current hellscape that we live in politically. And I don't think either of us was really setting out to say, well, we're going to comment on that directly. But I think we did want to sort of, we didn't want to shy away from the fact that like, look, power corrupts, and, there are always things happening above our heads that we know nothing about. And, we're just, doing our best to live day to day. So I think that we were able to kind of do that in a way that doesn't feel like we're lecturing the reader on anything.
Yeah, we definitely didn't want it to feel like a you're taking this, you're listening to this polemic or this long diatribe of what we think, but we were very mindful of like, where is the world going to be? Like, if we put our brains together and think where are things headed, like how's it going to end up? Taking into account things like politics and climate change and just how the world is now, but also not, people pick up this book to have a fun space adventure, but that doesn't mean we can't put in some actual concrete research and things that we think are going to happen. And so, and that's really where things like Star Trek shine, where you feel like you're getting a peek into what might be the future. I mean, Star Trek is very optimistic at its best, and that's, I think, also really soothing. And I don't think we wanted to just go down that road. We wanted to share something a little bit more realistic, but also not without hope.
And I think you did that well. I do think that. So in thinking about this interview, I'll tell the two of you, half of my education through high school was in a private religious school. So the only thing that existed in space was the moon, the stars, and God. That was it. There was no space travel. There was no aliens. There was none of that, because in a private religious school, that's heresy. So, of course, as an adult, I get to read all kinds of things because no one is saying I cannot. So I enjoyed the fact that the canvas was space. Was that something that you had to research a lot, or was that something that was sort of part of your DNA by the way you grew up, or how did that come about?
I think we were both big sci-fi readers. I don't want to speak for Rob, but I was definitely a big Star Wars and Star Trek kid in terms of like even reading beyond the media of the show or the movies. I read a lot of novels and sci-fi novels, and this kind of sprung from a place of pettiness almost. I'd wanted to write a Star Trek novel and it just never really happened. And I reached out to Rob and I was like, I've got this very loose idea, like very, very broad strokes idea of doing like this kind of sci-fi novel. And he was into it. And then it really became something different as we worked on it. But I think I've always been fascinated with science fiction. And I think like crime fiction, it allows you to say things about today, except it's hundreds of years in the future. But and also grounding it a little bit more. So it's not just like space battles, but it's about these people struggling in the bigger picture. But I don't know, Rob, what's your sci-fi backstory?
Yeah, I mean, I love sci-fi. I grew up on it, and I've never written like a full-on space thing before. And it was interesting because I think we kind of had to make the decision early on, like, do we want to go full Andy Weir on this and just make everything like, completely charted out and scientifically accurate, or do we want to have fun? And of course we decided like we want to have fun. And it took a little bit of research here and there just to sort of, figure out some basic things about, gravity and then space travel. But I think there's a degree to which like you never really have to be 100% accurate. You just have to be believable. So as long as the reader can buy it, it'll be fine. And
Rob is much more tuned into doing that deep dive of research. And so it really, I think the book benefited from a lot of his instinct to say, hey, we need to drill down on this a little more. Even if we're kind of explaining it away with magic science, it needs to be grounded in some kind of science. And I think the reader will believe you if there's that kernel of truth in there. And so I think that's reflected in the book.
Yeah. You need that little kernel just for people to kind of hook into, but then you can kind of say, because at the end of the day, like this is the problem that I had with Paradox Hotel, which is a time travel book. And I got so obsessed with the idea of like, I got to get time travel right. I'm like, wait a second. It's theoretical. You don't have to get it right. You just have to make it make sense. So I learned that lesson the hard way there and carried it over here, which is like, I don't have to make this all correct. I just have to make it make sense.
Yeah, I think one of the key things with sci-fi and fantasy, it's more about how the rules of your world, you just need to establish the rules and make them consistent, less about is it plausible or is it actually going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, and I know from seeing sci-fi, there were a lot of descriptions you didn't have to make because I've seen enough sci-fi that I could see it, So when they stand and look out the window and they look at, this Espara planet that they're coming close to, they I could see it just as well by your basic description. And when I say basic, I don't mean it was too little. Yeah. I just mean you didn't have to go into a big, long speech about what they saw, because I felt like I could see the same thing quite easily.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, H.G. Wells probably had a hell of a time writing about time travel, but I feel like we kind of benefit from the fact that these concepts are so familiar to readers that we get a little bit of shorthand in terms of being able to say, okay, people kind of roughly get what this is going to look like. So we don't need to belabor it to the point that it's like becoming like overly dense.
And I think neither of us really write that way. Like we're pretty not sparse, but very direct, like description in service of the story. So I don't think we deviated too much from that.
Thank you for that word direct. That was much better than my word basic. Sorry about that. This is why you two guys do all the good writing and I do all the talking and head in the wrong direction. So I love the inclusion of aliens, and I loved the way that you included them as something almost unknown, but yet at the same time known. I did not feel, as this reader didn't feel, I was jarred by the aliens. I felt like it was just another race or another tribe. And I loved that part.
Oh, good.
How was aliens on the map at the very beginning, or was that something that was added in?
Oh yeah, no, that's something that I think we kind of decided pretty early on that we wanted to play with, and I don't want to like talk too much about it, just so we can preserve like some of the surprise there. But yeah, no, it was a challenge because I think like anything, you know, again going back to what I was saying about like, you know, there is a degree of shorthand that we benefit from. There's also, because readers are familiar with these concepts, we have to figure out the way to do our version of it. You know,
Yeah.
and I want to do a version that no one's ever seen before. And I'm sure Alex, you know, you felt very much the same way. It's like, how can we put a new spin on this? And there's definitely some weird, interesting stuff that came out that I was pretty excited about.
Yeah,
I totally was excited about it. And that was something that for me, it was organic. It was not forced on me. And of course, I always like it when it comes out organically.
Yeah, and I think it applies too to like some of the ship stuff and just the dynamics. Like it would have been very easy to say, oh, this is like a United Federation of Planets type thing, and all the ships have naval ranks. And, you know, there's some stuff that we can pull and just for familiarity, but we also got to play with it. And having that springboard where people know these things from just the tropes of the genre was really helpful.
Wonderful, wonderful. Will you write? So this is your second collaboration, is that correct?
It's our third. Yeah,
all right.
We wrote a novella that crossed over our Private Eye characters, Ash McKenna and Pete Fernandez, and then we did a comic book called Blood Oath for Amazon Comixology and Dark Horse. And so, yeah, I'm sure we'll collaborate again.
I hope so.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, for sure.
We will definitely benefit from it if you do.
We definitely have more ideas in this universe as well, so I hope it does well enough that we can do another one.
And I will say, no cliffhangers, but at the end, I was like, oh, I can see number 2. Again, the book is Dark Space. It's out next Tuesday, October 8th. Thank you guys for being here. Alex, do you have a website or social media you'd like to share with the audience?
I do. You can find me at alexsegura.com. I'm not on any Twitter-like platforms. I mean, I'm on Blue Sky and Threads, but not super active. But Instagram, Alex Segura Jr., and my website. And I have a newsletter on Substack that you can subscribe to.
Fantastic. Rob, what about you?
Website is robwhart.com. I'm mostly on Instagram at robwhart1. And I also have a Substack that you can find links to on my various platforms.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,